Welcome to As We Get Older. I'm Laura Ornduff, and in this video, I want to ask the question, are there any properties that you have? Do you own anything that needs to be cleaned up? Now, I'm not talking about hoarding, I'm not talking about trash. I'm talking about very specifically the titles and deeds. Now, you may pause for a second thinking, this doesn't apply to me. But I ask that you take a moment, watch the video, because if it doesn't, great. But maybe somebody in your social circle, maybe a family member, this may apply to them. And I will tell you, more than a couple of people with whom I've spoken with, they have admitted this, they're in the same situation. They are like, oh, I didn't think about it. Yes, there is a deceased person on a piece of property they own. So the first part of this video, I do want to ask, are there any properties that you have that you could dispose of? Now, I'm not talking about investment properties. I'm talking about, do you have an extra car, in the garage that maybe you bought, you were going to restore and nobody wants? You haven't restored it in 20 years and, obviously it's property and there's a title to it. Is that something that maybe you could go ahead and sell? I'm not advocating that you do. I'm just asking the question. Are there any properties? Like, for example, in my situation, when my mother's father passed, there was a piece of property that went to his three daughters. There were three children, three girls. And when mom passed, because I'd said for years, Mom, sell it. I don't want it. Go ahead. I'm fine with it. Do whatever you want with it. So when she passed, the property was still in my mother's name and her two sisters' name. Now, I could not close Mom's estate until I had either my name or somebody. Basically, I had to get my mother's name removed from the deed. 50 years ago, we probably could have gotten away with it with no problem. Probably 20 years ago. But in today's world, with computers and cross-checking everything, that was not going to fly. We needed to clean that up. So when we went to go sell the property, my two aunts, the only thing they had to do was provide a notarized signature. Easy. For me, because Mom's name was on the deed, I had to get a triple authenticated will before I could get the paperwork to do the notarized signature. Now, if you want to Google triple authenticated will, that is absolutely fine. I looked it up. It's a very legal term, all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to tell you what I had to do. In my situation, for my city, my county, and my state, the laws and jurisdictional codes that applied to me involved, I had to take Mom's will. I had to apply that Mom's will, which was already registered in the courthouse. 3 judges had to look at it. And each judge had to put their seal and their signature on. It was on the front page, means 3 different judges, and it was triple authenticated. It wasn't that expensive, but it wasn't $10, and it did take about 3 weeks from the application until I got it back. And so then I had to send it to, actually it was in a different state, it was actually in Virginia, and give it to them. So that kind of held up where easily the buyer could have backed out. So it was just an extra little step for a piece of property that my mother and her 2 sisters all admitted that, yeah, we've been meaning to sell for years. So that was my situation. Now, probably 5 weeks ago, literally 5 weeks ago, before filming this video, I was talking to a gentleman and talking about, just getting, deceased people off the titles and different things. And he admitted that in his situation, let's call this gentleman Paul, his father had purchased 2 cemetery plots, which technically they're both property. I mean, that's property. And he decided to be buried in, plot number 2. But the first plot, he made it clear to his son, Paul, and Paul's sister, that the plot was Paul's. And, the sister got, jewelry, whatever, little knickknacks. But the will said everything is split 50-50. And he was just kind of joking, going, yeah, I'll let my kids deal with it. Now, again, I'm not a legal person. I'm not trying to give you legal advice. But the question you need to ask, if you're in this situation, you need to ask your attorney, your legal team, what does that mean? Because in his situation, what could happen, let's say he passed, I think he had two sons. So let's say he had two sons, and his sister, let's say she had two sons. At some point, somebody's got to clean up that property. So if Paul and his sister had passed, so at that point you've got the four grandchildren of the original owner. The will, Paul's will says, the grandfather's will, the original owner says everything's split 50-50. So does that mean that plot is half the sister's estate and half Paul's estate? And if they in turn do 50-50, do each one of those grandchildren have 25% of the plot? Now, it's a small plot. Again, they're not cheap, but what if it were a house? What if the situation had been that maybe Paul was given, and there was a larger estate, Paul was given the house and the sister was given the stock, and they were both in total agreement, but Paul never put his name on the property. So maybe his father died, I don't know, maybe early 1970s, and maybe in a small town. Nothing against small towns. I live in a small town. I love small towns, but my extended family's from small towns. A lot of stuff was done with your honor and your name and a handshake. You didn't need a signature. You just needed the handshake and word of mouth. So there's not always paperwork that followed what was the intent. So let's say in that situation, again, the sister was given stocks, Paul was given the house. The house is still in the original owners, which would be Paul's father's name. Paul passes. Paul's sister passes. Well, she's already taken care of the stocks. Those are in her name. So when she passes, her two sons have it. So Paul passes. His two sons go to clean up his property. Do Paul's sister's sons, do they have a right to claim? Because that was a verbal agreement. There's nothing in writing other than everything is split 50-50. So does that have to be split 50-50 between those Paul and his sister's estates? Don't know. I'm not a legal person. But the whole point is, please stop, take a moment, work with your estate planner, work with legal team, financial people, whoever you're working with. But take a moment and look at the properties that you have, because the sooner you clean it up, the easier it is going to be for future generations. Because let's go back to the situation where Paul's, let's say again, maybe it did say in the will, it's 50-50. However, Paul gets the house, the sister gets the stocks, whatever. The will was filed in the courthouse, 1972. 1982, it burned down. No digital records. So again, just pause for a moment. Just say, do you have any property? Again, not investment properties. I'm not talking about that. But is there anything that maybe your kids have said, no, I don't want? Or if you're working with, your older ones, loved ones, and you're saying, Mom and Dad, go ahead and cash it out. Go ahead and sell it, whatever. Just work with your legal team, your financial team, work with those folks and go ahead and process it out, because for every next generation, they've got to go back and prove that the original person willed it to that person. And then that person who inherited it, they willed it to the next group, The documentation gets lost. And again, with today's world, with computerized world and cross-checking, you can't just say, oh, I'll let the next generation deal with it. You can't close estates anymore like that. So hopefully I've given you a few things to think about. This is a weird, vague concept. If you have any questions, because hopefully I have started triggering some questions, again, get with your legal team, get with your financial team, and just start asking questions. If you've got that estate planner, talk to them and say, hey, have you checked? Is everything kind of clear? Do I need to do anything in my generation before the next generation? because I know you love them and you want to help them out. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.